Melissa.
Hi.
I'm so happy to you're here.
I'm so happy I made it, first of all. It was rough.
Melissa, a couple of months ago, you posted a really viral video when you talked about how your biggest retailer had walked back their DE&I commitments. And you had a really different point of view from some of the people out there that were saying, boycott, boycott, boycott. Can you share with the audience what you said?
Yeah, and it's not that I had necessarily a different perspective than the audience, because I think that as a company, when you make inclusivity a big part of your identity and then change that, of course your customer who was used to seeing themselves, that customer who was used to being serviced through your channels, of course they're going to feel disappointed. But my customer is primarily Black and brown women. And those women, if they were going to call for a boycott, I knew that inevitably our sales would suffer. And so my goal in the video that ultimately got like 5 million views was to educate the customer on what does it mean to boycott? And how far will that boycott go? Because ultimately, if you look at the stats, sure, said retailer is down maybe 6%, but my sales are down like 35%. And so it's like at the end of the day, who's actually being hurt here? It's certainly not the retailer en masse. It is ultimately the businesses that are looking to support you.
Where do you think the disconnect is between the Black and brown consumer and the brands themselves? I think you said to me, no other industry do you have to kind of go into something like this or supply chain or tariffs. And is that because the expectation is so much higher, or do you think it's just because beauty is so personal?
Well, I think it's because beauty is personal. I also think that largely it's because this is a customer who for years has been underserviced as a founder. These are people who have been underfunded. So, these people are used to getting the short ends of the stick. And I think the disconnect becomes where you feel as though things are actually changing. You see that light at the end of the tunnel, and then all of a sudden you realize that in fact it was a trend, that in fact they didn't care, that in fact, those black squares didn't do anything, and the disconnect becomes really painful because you then have expectations. Whereas prior to a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments, no one expected much. You knew that there weren't going to be brands that serviced you. You knew that, when X conglomerate launched, they would not have a shade range that would be inclusive to everyone in your family. That was the norm. And now, or 2020, everyone held their flag and said, we're here for Black-owned businesses. We're here for Black beauty consumers. We're here for, brown people. And then it was like, oh, wait, that was a farce. And I think we're seeing the community reject it. They're like, you don't get to do that. You don't get to yo-yo your brand values and get me to shop with you one day and then change your mind the next.
The Lip Bar is 13 years old. So you've been around way before, some of these movements, and before body positivity or DE&I was being popularized in a lot of different rooms and circles. Talk to me about why you did this. I mean, was it that you didn't see yourself? Was it that, that MAC lip gloss that you loved when you were a girl wasn't enough anymore?
Yeah, I started the Lip Bar not because I love makeup. I did not start it because I'm a makeup artist. You have many brands like Danessa here who start because they see a product gap or they want to produce a new and beautiful product. I started the Lip Bar because I was so frustrated with the sameness of the industry. This idea that beauty looked like one thing, this idea that you needed to look a certain way in order to be considered beautiful. And I thought about myself, I thought about my sisters, my nieces, and I'm like, wow, if they could just have the self-esteem necessary to achieve their dreams, if they could just see themselves present, if they could just know that beauty doesn't have to look like one thing and that they are in fact enough, wow, what could they conquer? And so that's what I was solving for when I started the Lip Bar, making lipstick in my kitchen when I was working on Wall Street. It had nothing to do with like how much money I wanted to make. It was largely about the impact that I wanted to have. The Lip Bar is a self-esteem business. And so you look at, 13 years in business, and we've had slow and steady growth all 13 years, which has been a true blessing. But it's really because we've always been a community-based business. And so you see the industry shifting from DEI to tariffs to, your retailers. But yet and still, our sales are down 35% in our largest retailer, but our .com is up 110%, and was also last year, and we continue to grow year over year. We're doubling our EBITDA this year, and it's like, why? Why is the Lip Bar able to sustain? Why is the Lip Bar able to maintain its growth? Because we started the business for the community. Every day we are servicing that community, and they show up to support us.
One thing we hear a lot from Black brands as well as minority-oriented brands is that they don't have the permission to play with white women or European women. Talk to me about that, whether or not the Lip Bar does.
Well, I think everyone has permission to play, right? But in this world of personalization, everyone is wanting to see themselves. And so by centering Black women in a lot of our content and our assets on our website, as a white woman or just a non-Black woman, if you come to our site, you're like, oh, wait, because there are Black women here centered in beauty, I am not supposed to shop. And so it becomes a very frustrating experience for a Black founder, because how do you get to scale if Black people in this country are only 15% of the population, or less in some instances? So it reminds me to, think about why I started the brand in terms of like, this is our core and we're going to continue to service them. But at the end of the day, there's no difference between my lips and your lips and her lips. Everyone is trying to solve a beauty need. And we are first seeking to show that customer that she is enough. Beyond that, we're seeking to show that customer that we have amazing effing products. Like, we don't want you to support us because of support. We don't, black business owners don't need your charity. We need you to actually try our products. We need you to actually check your bias that says, if a Black woman is centered, that's not for me, because Black women are experiencing the opposite every single day. When you go to the beauty shelf and you don't see a Black woman, and you're like, okay, I'll still give it a shot. So we do have the right to play. We do have the room to play. Every one of you would look fabulous in Boss Lady. But at the end of the day, it takes the courage from the consumer to say, it's okay to not see myself as so many others have experienced it as well.
That was very powerful, Melissa.
Thank you.
A storyline that we've heard a lot as these DE&I commitments have been walked back and the funding has dried up is that, Black businesses have closed and, were they the right brands to begin with? And, were they serving the customer? Are they needed? But you are a Black founder, but you're also just a founder.
I'm just a founder.
You're just a founder. So why do you think those businesses closed? Why do you think, they were maybe subject to kind of the changes in the market? And what are you thinking about besides just being a Black founder?
Well, I think a lot of businesses will close. Black-owned businesses, brown-owned businesses, white-owned businesses. We are in a tough market. We are subject to tariffs. We do have, somewhat of a recession. We do have underconsumption trends taking place on the internet. People do have too much shit. Frankly, they do. And so I think we will see a lot more failures, not only in the beauty industry, but just business in general, because as the cost of living continues to rise, as inflation rears its ugly head and those dollars don't follow, people are a lot more conscious of how they're spending their disposable income. And so I ask you guys to take the word Black out of it. It's just that some businesses are succeeding and some are failing. And some of them are failing not because they're Black owned, maybe they're just bad operators, which can happen in any industry from any person, you know?
Right. What do you think about what are you thinking about for you yourself personally? You know, you mentioned tariffs, you mentioned inflation. You are sold in mass aisles, you know, you are a masstige brand, but have you thought about retail in a different way now? Are you thinking about production in a different way? What is, you know, when we walk into Melissa's office, what are you talking to your team about?
We're talking about channel diversification a lot, and not even just because of the retail ups and downs, but simply because I think the customer is moving. A few years ago, people were not as excited about Amazon. Today, they are. People are also really excited about TikTok Shop. We've seen a lot of growth on TikTok Shop. And it goes back to that idea of personalization and people wanting to be seen. So you go on TikTok and you see a woman who is your skin twin. You see a woman who has acne just like you or who has wrinkles just like you, and she's telling you exactly what she did in order to solve her problem. And you're like, yep, I'm gonna buy it. One click, TikTok Shop. So we're trying to figure out how do we continue to grow that channel while also understanding that it's fickle. Virality is fickle. We've gone viral many times, and you know, God knows that's really challenging to keep up with, because sometimes you go viral with something you didn't even want to go viral with, and now you're out of stock. So we're trying to figure out how to have planned virality, how to have strategic growth on products that we actually want to move, and frankly, how do we get out of the box of, hey, only Black or brown women shop us because the founder of the lip bar is a Black woman.
Talk to me about values, because values is something that we've heard a lot about in beauty, and it's not just D&I. It's, you know, when you're talking about sustainability, when you're talking about serving an older customer. But do you think businesses today can lead with values when trends are coming and going?
I do. It's interesting. I've spoken with a few bankers recently. I'm always curious to know what's happening in the market, right? And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, we're like an ancient brand. We're 13 years old and we're still small. We're still growing. You're always sort of thinking about, you know, how you can do it better. And the tune of bankers has changed this year. They've all said that, you know what? It's great that you're 13 years old. It's fantastic that you have a true community, that you have a true customer. We're not afraid that if someone, you know, if you have some sort of transaction, you're gonna go out of business in 2 years. You're not a flash in the pan. You do have a true community. And so that really excites me, because trends always change, but honestly, my best seller in the company has been my best seller for 7 straight years. People consistently buy and come to you for what they know you for. And it's just our job to get more creative, to figure out how to tell, you know, new stories and interesting stories, exciting stories about those same products, even in the wake of trends, because like, you'll always need a red lipstick.
My last question for you is, you know, beauty is such a personal decision, but it's also very practical. And yes, there are brands and there are retailers and investors in the room, but there are also customers. What would you tell them? What's your pitch for the lip bar?
Ooh, my pitch for the lip bar is that we are a community-based business that happens to sell makeup. And those makeup products are vegan, cruelty-free, easy to use, made for women of every complexion, made for you. And so again, I want to challenge you guys, when you are investing in businesses, when you're thinking about your retail shelves, when you are even thinking about products to copy, because I know a lot of people are doing that, consider brands that come from people who don't look like you. Look across the aisle. Oftentimes when you see Black-owned or diverse brands, especially in mass, they're all clumped together. We're all in one tiny section of the aisle. And some people don't even go down that aisle. And it's just a reminder that Black beauty is beauty. It's just beauty that may look slightly different than what you're used to, but it's still beautiful no less.
Thank you so much, Melissa.